This episode of The Benefit Whisper is brought to you by Route 3 Insurance and Financial Services, where smarter benefits begin. If you're tired of rising healthcare costs and opaque insurance contracts, Route 3 is here to help you take control. They specialize in transparent, employer-driven benefit strategies that protect your people and your bottom line. Ready to break away from the status quo? Visit www.fixmybenefitsnow.com and discover how Route 3 can help you build a plan that actually works for your team and for your budget. Welcome back to the Benefit Whisper. I'm your host, Ralph Weber. Today, we are getting to some of parts that nobody sees in the healthcare industry and the PBM, the pharmacy. Very important. We're getting into the deep corners of healthcare, pharmacy benefits. Joining me today, once again, is Rachel Strauss.
Thank you for having me.
She's been a big leader in this movement. She spent more than 20 years in pharmacy benefits and health plan strategy, was part of the early team at EHIM, and now runs her own firm, helping employers and brokers and TPAs decode PBM contracts, rebates, and pricing structures. And she was on episode 30, and she is back again today. Rachel, it's great to see you back for another episode.
Ralph, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It was good seeing you in person at SIA a few weeks ago.
What a blur. What a blur, Ralph. SIA is a blur.
Yeah. You and me both. But, there's a lot to unpack here. There's so much. I had Dr. David Scheinker on a couple of episodes ago talking about contract standardization. And he's a PhD professor at Stanford. And he does a lot of research in the cost of billing and administration in healthcare, not pharmacy, but healthcare in general. And he estimates that we spend $1.7 trillion a year on the cost of administration and billing, and thinks that we can easily remove $1 trillion from that, partly with contract standardization.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about rebates versus net cost, because we always hear about the rebates. How much of a rebate am I going to get? And some PBM contracts, when they go to RFP, are based on the rebates, not the cost. So let's just dive in there.
So first and foremost, Ralph, let's talk a little bit about rebates what they were intended to be, how they've evolved, and some of the misconceptions. So first and foremost, initially, rebates, in my opinion, and you really could probably track this back, and I've not spent the time researching, but it's probably not that far off. Initially, what we know as rebates, incentives for medications to go through, were originally paid to physicians. Okay. So Ralph, you've been in healthcare. I'm in 20 plus years, but I still can remember when this changed. There were essentially anti-kickback laws that were formed, not allowing pharmaceuticals anymore to pay physicians to push their products. So if you think about it, this was in the days where the Pfizer rep would meet the doctor. The doctor would get the Pfizer pen and the Pfizer pen paper, and maybe even that Pfizer trip to Hawaii.
Wow.
But if they could get their numbers higher, they would actually receive cash bonuses from the pharmaceutical companies. And first the cash went away, and then it took time, but all those incentives, some got smart. There are still talking tours and things physicians do for pharma. But it is no longer directly tied to how much direct product those doctors are writing. Okay. So you have pharmaceutical companies. They want to figure out, how are we going to get patients on our drugs? Sure, we're going to put them on TV. We're going to take out ads in the papers and the magazines, but there's got to be a way to get more people on our drugs. And so what they did is they went after the payer market. And so what they did was they essentially would contract with the pharmacy benefit manager and say, we will pay you dollars if you push our drugs. And how does a PBM push drugs? They do it with formularies. They do it through prior authorizations. Step therapy is one of the biggest misconceptions. People think step therapy was designed to lower the cost of care and make sure people were on the right drug. It was not. Step therapy, by many stretches, was designed so that you could push a certain drug and the PBMs could prove they were doing the work to push a different drug. And that is really, how these rebates started. And so just, I don't even know, millions, billions. I always feel like Austin Powers, and I don't know the exact amount, goes like
Right.
$1 million. Like it's many, many dollars went to PBMs.
Right.
And then the PBMs used some of that revenue as a way to pay consultants. And that was
Consultants.
the next step in evolution in rebates. So you had the PBMs
Okay.
making just boatloads of dollars. And by the
Mhm.
way, I think the biggest conflict of interest that you saw happen with this was Merck and Medco. So I don't know,
Mhm.
again, how long you've been in the self-funded space, but there was a time
29 years.
pharmaceuticals launched
Mhm.
their own PBM, Medco, and
Right.
Merck Medco was the PBM. Talk about conflicts of interest. Not
Mhm.
only are they processing claims, but they're also owned by a pharmaceutical company. So
Wow.
that dissolved, right? So it became just
Mhm.
Medco.
Okay.
And now they have all these dollars and they're going after consultants. Now, I know a lot about this because the early days of my career were with a very unique PBM
Mhm.
that didn't have any rebate contracts whatsoever. So I was this salesperson in a world where I would go meet with brokers and they'd say, well, we're getting $5 a script, $10 a script in commission for
Mhm.
pushing insert PBM name at the time. And so that was kind of the beginning of me realizing, okay, rebates are here, then they're there. Well, then entered the transparent boom, really in the mid early 2000s,
Mhm.
where, and I credit PBMs like Navitus for really taking the stand and saying, this is our admin fee. And in a world where no other PBM even had an admin fee,
Mhm.
with the exception again of my little homegrown PBM that I worked for, very few had that kind of model. It also began to show the rebates and it started to
Mhm.
say, this is what's going to a consultant. And then you had, with 5,500 forms and more transparency. And now all of a sudden commissions are being disclosed. And so this evolution of rebates, which was
Mhm.
essentially money from pharma to push product, became a metric of paying people to sell. And all you kept seeing were increase, increase, increase. And that is
Mhm.
because that money never made it back to who was paying for the drugs. So now, that I've kind of explained this evolution, now
Mhm.
I would say 90% of the employers out there have wised up. They think they're their rebates. They know there's rebates. They want their rebates.
Right.
I still think there's revenue that is going to, producers, and there's still definitely games playing, but more employers are getting some of that money back.
Mhm.
So now let's talk about how rebates work. And you're my mind, we go to Best Buy, right? We buy a TV, we see it has a rebate. Okay, either it's instant, right? And we're getting it at the
Right.
register, or sometimes they want you to fill out a form. They want your demographic information, and then you get a
Mhm.
check back from Sony or whoever
Right.
within 4 to 6 weeks. The misconception with rebates is that the minute your claim goes through, immediately a dollar amount is gone back to your pharmacy benefit manager.
Okay.
And that's not how it happens. They are based, Ralph, completely on market share. So what is happening is a PBM, first and foremost, I contract with you, Weber Enterprises, and say, I'm going to give you an estimate of this rebate. But really
Mhm.
what I need to do as a PBM is I am taking claims on a quarterly basis. I am then submitting them to what's called a rebate aggregator. And that aggregator is, yes, at some point there is an NDC level, but it's all put together and garbled. And the PBMs are receiving these checks at minimum 6 months out. And I would say the majority are 9 to 12 months after the day that claim was processed. So now you've got to take into account, let's say a rebate was on this patient and they leave or the group doesn't renew. Who's
Mhm.
getting the dollars? We're talking 9 to 12 months later in a world where some of these drugs are 10, 15, $20,000. So rebates are by design complicated, the opposite of transparent. I mean, murky. How can you figure out, what each patient, really should get back and where is the dollar? Where are those dollars coming from? And how long is it going to take? And so that's, kind of rebates in a nutshell and what the problem is with them. The other issue, again, is depending on the size of the employer, are they getting rebates based on specific claims or is it a blend of the book of business? Because, I could argue on specialty, it's pretty close. I mean, I would say if you have a specialty claim and all's there, that rebate will go back to the employer if the contract says that. We talked about in that last
Yes.
episode.
Yeah.
And the other piece is that if you don't have specialty and they're just looking at brands, are they actually looking at what each drug yielded, or is the PBM just going to give you a blanket average guarantee?
Mhm.
Your contract, if you're a listener and you have an average guarantee written into your contract, you're going to get that average guarantee. And guess what? The PBMs are not writing that to lose money.
Course. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question because we hear a lot of employers focused on 100% rebate pass through, okay? 100% transparent pass through. But I've heard you say that can be a little bit of a distraction if the net cost isn't
Unless
tracked properly.
unless it's 100% pass through from the aggregator, meaning not the PBM and what they got to give you back, but like actual person who is filing your claims, the
Mhm.
entity. There cannot be 100% pass through of rebates because it's a pass through of what was passed through.
Uh,
So the question an employer needs to understand is unless they're the ones hiring the firm, and by the way, any aggregation company, they charge. They charge.
Okay.
So I'm going to use a PBM. I'm not going to name a PBM because I don't want to call anybody out, but this
Right.
is factual, I would say, for
Mhm.
more than 70% of even the pass through transparent PBMs. If they're saying 100% pass through, what they're doing is they're then going to an aggregator. And the question is does that aggregator go right to where the rebates live?
Mhm.
Or are they going to somebody else that is aggregating where those rebates live?
So there might be another layer,
And
another
so, like, I
middleman.
can tell you, I've seen PBMs that go to one aggregator that is then going to another aggregator that is then going through Prime Therapeutics, which by the
Wow.
way, Prime, 99% sure I have a 33% chance of getting this right, but Prime goes up through, by the way,
Mhm.
either ESI or Optum. So now that PBM who you feel really good doing business with, the rebates that are now 100% pass through are coming from 4 people. Now, every level gets a piece because they're
Right.
collecting and filing. And
Mhm.
so how diluted is that 100%? And, I will say this for the pass through PBMs and the ones that if your rebates are not high, it shouldn't matter because the goal of these rebate programs and
Mhm.
one of the arguments of using a sub aggregator
Right.
is you don't have to meet sales qualifications. Okay. So I'm a new business owner, you mentioned, right? And so I opened an account at Chase Bank. Why did I choose Chase? Because I got one of those things in the mail when I got my EIN that said free $600. I want $600. Well,
Sure.
in order to get $600, I had to meet certain criteria from Chase. I
Mhm.
had to keep so much in my
Right.
account. I had to write so many checks. I had to put in,
Mhm.
certain things, direct deposit, whatever. But I knew what I had to do. So
Mhm.
imagine the more rebates you are getting,
Mhm.
there are criteria that you have to fit as a PBM in order to maximize that rebate. And this
Right.
all gets back to how does a PBM maximize a rebate?
Mhm.
They push the drug, they relax prior authorization protocols. So I'm going to give you a drug. I'll give you 2 quizzes. We'll see how, Ralph, if you get this right.
Okay.
First and foremost, there was a drug 5 years ago that is rumored, and again, I've had media training now, so I'm not going to get sued. That is rumored to have made deals with PBMs that in return for relaxing the prior authorization and upping the rate, they would get higher rebates. It was a specialty drug. Do you have
Wow.
any guess what that specialty drug was?
Harvoni?
Close, starts with an H.
Um, Give me a hint. What
Rheumatoid arthritis showed up on
oh,
every
not
single
Enbrel.
Humira.
Humira.
Mara did, knowing that the
Mhm.
biosimilar was coming. They
Right.
wanted as much market share as they could get. And so they
Right.
went to PBMs and said, we're going to give you a ton of rebates, but we need as many patients on this drug as possible. And all of a sudden, you saw prior authorization protocol. Companies that didn't have any specialty drugs in the mix, boom, all of a sudden, everyone's on Humira. There wasn't an epidemic of that at the
Mhm.
time. It was that Humira was relaxing, the PBMs were relaxing to get more people because they were being paid to do so.
Mm.
See where this conflict is?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
definitely.
then there was another drug 2 years ago
Mhm.
that just pounded the PBMs with rebates. Number one, they wanted brand exclusivity. I would say it was 3 years ago. It was not a specialty drug. It was an injectable, but they had all these PBMs relax protocols because it was only FDA approved for one thing at the time 3 or 4 years ago. And then I'll
Mm.
tell you, here's your hint. 1 in 3 Americans know somebody on this drug. I'll give you the letter. Your listeners, if they're listening, can't see it. It starts with a,
Letter O.
so do you have
Ozempic?
bingo.
Wow.
So what happened is the pharmaceutical companies, they knew it was helping people lose weight. They needed to
Mhm.
wait for Wegovy and all the other products to get FDA approval.
Right.
But their number one goal, get as
Mhm.
many people on this drug as possible. And so
Right.
the PBMs 3 years ago, Prime, I live in Texas. My husband had Prime. I can just give you this example. Ozempic was not being tracked, right? It was a type 2 diabetic drug. And if your
Mhm.
doctor wrote certain check marks, boom, you
Right.
got it,
Yep.
right? Well, now Prime is like announcing we have protocols. We're making sure it's the right patient. Where were they 3 years ago? Before, 50% of like the working force women were requesting one of these medications. And
Right.
so my point is, it doesn't mean that these prior authorizations couldn't have existed 3 years ago.
Mm.
It's that the rebates didn't allow them to.
Okay. Wow.
So my argument for employers listening is I don't
Right.
care how many rebates you're getting back. Your goal should be to get to as close to a zero in rebate dollars as possible.
Okay. So why isn't there okay, so Mark Cuban, as you know, has done cost plus where he buys
Mhm.
from the manufacturer and he adds 15% in the dispensing fee.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all transparent. There's no rebate because there doesn't have to be. He's giving you the next net
It's
cost.
also generics, but yes.
Yeah. Now, are there any other PBMs that do that?
Well,
Like an actual PBM?
so I laugh because the actual definition of spread pricing is
Mhm.
cost plus. So to answer that question, yeah, there's PBMs who do that, but they're charging a lot more than wholesale plus 15%.
Right.
They're charging a spread margin and not disclosing what they're making. So I would say yes. And the PBMs are typically not buying directly from a manufacturer. There is an
Right.
exception, which is when a PBM owns their own pharmacy. They do have the ability to do that. And that is
Mhm.
where you're seeing all of these, legislations in various states where they don't want pharmacies to own their own PBMs. I don't think every single company does that. I can give you an
Mhm.
example. Oriad, there's a PBM in Mark Cuban is how I found them, by the way, just because they
Mhm.
both testified together last year. But
Mhm.
Oriad, they are owned by pharmacists. They have a pharmacy, but they're not pushing people to their pharmacy. They don't, they have them. They're for the community. But the
Right.
whole reason they opened a PBM was because of all the big PBMs pushing people to their pharmacies and also at a detriment to the employers cost wise.
Okay. So if an employer insists on a full rebate pass through, what's the one metric that you would say they should put on their scorecard so that they don't overpay somewhere else?
It depends on the size of the employer. And the first metric is if you are
Mhm.
over, I would say 1,000 employees, the group should be looking for their own rebate contract direct. I would get the PBM completely out of the way. I would
Mhm.
get your own rebate contract that is just basically you're going to take your claims, you're going to submit them. You don't have to do
Right.
anything for them. You can give them the data. That's what the pharmaceutical companies want, by the way.
Mm.
File and go from there. Under 1,000, I would just be aware of you don't want any rebate guarantee. You can have minimums built in. Minimum
Right.
guarantees are okay, but you don't
Mhm.
want any guarantee because that's all you're going to get. And you want to be
Gotcha.
able to make sure that you can get rebates on everything.
Okay. So look for a minimum guarantee, not a flat
Yeah,
guarantee. Okay.
correct.
Cool.
And don't judge your PBMs based on minimum guarantees.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. That's great. That's great insight for employers because employers, CFOs, CEOs, HR people, more and more are having to follow their fiduciary duty and do what's right.
Right.
So that's a huge thing for people to know.
And that's why the word fiduciary, by the way, has become so common now in PBM marketing.
Mhm.
I only know of one, maybe two, that actually take full fiduciary responsibility on behalf of the plan. But you want that word somewhere in your contract, whether it's fiduciary like, somewhere where you
Mhm.
have skin in the game as the employer to come back to your PBM and say, like, why did this happen?
Okay. Interesting. Now, I've also heard you say that not every PBM declining a drug is a bad thing. Can you give me an example when prior authorization or step therapy for the actual improved outcomes have lowered your total plan spend?
So at EHIM back in the day, before, in the early days, original owner, we had a list of medications we called designer drugs. Call it what you will.
Right.
We were a woman owned business. So designer,
Mhm.
we liked it. It was a cool
Sure.
term. But we
Yeah.
used that term when a drug was nothing more than an advancement in an existing medication, meaning
Mhm.
take it once a day, not twice a day.
Right.
And the best and most interesting case in that was with EpiPen. So there
Okay.
was a point in time where EpiPen, the first part of the story is it actually skyrocketed in price, which the government got involved. And the reason they did that is because at the exact same time, they also released a generic of the exact same drug, so
Mm.
epinephrine, They were trying to keep people on the brands as long as they could and get
Mhm.
as much money as they could. Well, once that was, the dust settled, enter a new product called AviQ.
Okay.
AviQ was epinephrine. It was the exact same drug. The only difference is that it was in a speaker box, so you could push a button and it would tell you how to put the epinephrine in your body in the
Mhm.
case of keeping it. It was $6,000 compared to $44 epinephrine. Number one, that should be an excluded. That drug
Mhm.
had no business ever being on a single formulary. It was
Right.
rebates, but the other thing that was interesting with that medication is that I did see it one time overturned in my career, and that was
Mhm.
because the patient was a minor and the caregiver was blind. And so that
Oh,
was one
okay.
instance where I remember and we went back to the employer and said,
Right.
look, here's our recommendation. This is the case at hand. You can, this is the first time we have somebody that this may not work or work for. And, so that was one example.
Mhm.
Other drug I just remembered was called Duexis.
Okay.
Duexis, Duexis. And I used to do this a lot when I would speak, when I worked for the PBM, and I would literally have an audience member Google what Duexis was. Real fast let's just see what price it's still. I'm
Uh-huh.
just going on GoodRx right now just to
Okay.
see if it still helps me. And then I'm going to have you Google something for me.
Okay.
Duexis was a medication. Let's see, brand name Duexis is still, yeah, great. So I don't know if you can read this, it'll be backwards, but can you see sort of what that number is?
Not really.
$2,586.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
For a 30-day supply of Duexis.
Hmm.
If you do have a browser open that you can look at real fast while we're talking.
Let me see here. Let me
So
see if
while
I
you're
can
doing that, I'm going to tell you Duexis came out and it was a wonder drug. It was a
okay.
pain medication. It was simply
Yep.
for pain, but it also helped coat the stomach.
Right.
Wouldn't mind. You know how every drug has in parentheses two medications? Do you see the two medications that make up Duexis? Did you
No.
find it?
No.
All right, then
Oh, sorry. What did you want me to Google?
I just want you to look up the word Duexis.
Duexi.
Yes, and when you find it, you're gonna see in parentheses what that is.
What it says here, and this is the AI overview. Duexis is the now discontinued brand name for prescription
Still so expensive.
combining the medication of ibuprofen
Which
and
is
NSAID for pain relief and
Advil,
Advil
okay,
and famotidine,
which is
an
peptid
H2
AG.
receptor. Yep,
It's
sorry.
Pepsid. So what
Pepsid.
I gave you a price for, which now I understand why it's still so high because it's been discontinued,
Mhm,
it was a $2,500 pill.
mhm.
It was the exact same as taking one Advil and one Pepsid.
Wow.
Now, Ralph, I know you're not a, wizard on the drug prices, it's not what
Mhm.
you live and breathe, but do you think you have an idea of what a bottle of Advil and a bottle of Pepsid cost?
Oh, yeah.
Would you say it's
Absolutely.
less than $2,000?
Let me see. Yes. I
Right.
think it's way less.
Back to your original question. That drug, again, should be excluded. It should not have even been
Right.
under step therapy. So,
Yeah.
where I like to see step therapy used is, when there is a new drug that is not the exact same.
Right.
And I myself have gone through step therapy for various things, anything from, and I'll get a little personal without making it without making it weird, but I've had migraines. I have tried different things and I have gone through my own version of step therapy to
Right.
find what works. And I've tried things and I also went in not knowing what I wanted.
Mm.
Step therapy also needs to be a physician understanding a patient seeing something on TV and thinking that's
Yeah.
going to be them. I always, my hairdresser, if I bring in a picture of, let's say, I don't know, like some movie star, Megan Fox, right? And I say, I want to look like her. She's
Right.
gonna look at me and be like, "Well, let's talk about this because, you're not Megan Fox." I mean, I
Yeah.
wanna be Megan Fox, but I'm not.
Yeah.
My point being is you try things to get to the outcome, and
Mhm.
when PBM's role is to do that in the most cost and ethical way.
Okay.
Ideally ethical first.
Mhm.
With so much on the market today, it's hard to see if a PBM's doing one before
Mhm.
the other.
There's so much. Every time I have somebody on in the PBM space, I learn more and more scary things. But these are things, Rachel, that employers need to know. CEOs, CFOs, HR people.
And we talked before the beginning of this call when we were still in the green room, Ralph,
Mhm.
I I don't discount pharmaceutical companies. Anne has some expletive. We both have a good friend, Anne Lewandowski. I'll give her a shout out. I know you have
Mhm.
episodes
Yep.
with her. We have a joke and she has a hashtag, an unladylike word. It has 4 letters and she always says, blankety blank pharma because they are playing
Wow.
games and doing things. And I always laugh with her. I go, at the end of the day though, like we want pharmaceutical companies to do well. We want them
Sure.
to have
Yeah,
advancements
yeah.
in science.
Yeah.
We want them to cure cancer.
Mhm.
But we have to figure out how they're able to make money without it coming from so many Americans paying for it. And
Right.
that's when you get into all these, favored nation pricing with Trump and all these different pieces.
Yeah.
Because if these companies have figured out how to be profitable in other countries at a fraction of the cost to the patient, what are we doing wrong here?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's these kickbacks that you're talking about. It's the lack of transparency. It's the issuing patent for adding baking soda to a pill or Pepsid AC to ibuprofen, things like that, which give them a patent, protection for a long time.
Or
Some of
new
the things.
FDA approvals. I mean, the Wegovy, Ozempic, they're the
Mhm.
same drug. They're the
Yeah.
same, Zepbound and
Right.
Mounjaro. I mean, they're the same drug, just different FDA.
Wow. Wow. Crazy. Okay, so let's try to cover one more thing. We're coming close to the end, but this is fascinating. So let's talk about quick wins for employers and change management. So say an employer is kind of stuck in the mid-market space. They're frustrated that they can't just rip up and replace their PBM tomorrow. So I shouldn't have said mid market, but in between different markets, so they just can't rip up their contract. So, what is the one lever that they could pull in the next 90 days to start bending the curve?
So it just depends on geography, right? And it
Right.
depends on the employer's appetite. And also, unfortunately, it depends on the employer's contract.
Hmm.
So if you're listening to this, and again, here's that, press training PR, I am not an attorney and I'm not giving out legal advice.
Right.
But I would have an attorney review your contract or a
Hmm.
PBM consultant like myself. If I have it in writing, I can do it.
Hmm.
Verify within the contract you have signed,
Yeah.
you are allowed to do cost saving metrics.
Okay.
You would be baffled at how many contracts state that you cannot go after coupons, you cannot promote generics, you cannot do the things that actually save your company money. So if you
Right.
are in between, first and foremost, you want to do that. Okay. Because if
Hmm.
any of these suggestions I'm going to offer could contractually disqualify you from other things that, are in your in place contract. So assuming you don't have those pieces, and if you do, by the way, you can also get amendments to your contract. And
Hmm.
that's also real fun to see if your PBM will listen. The
Right.
most notable case recently of that, just so you know, Ralph, was the state of North Carolina recently amended their Caremark contract to enable them to go direct to Eli Lilly to get a better discount on
Hmm.
their medication, GLP-1s. And Caremark had to let them. And Caremark
Wow.
fought, but they did, and it became a media thing. But that's going direct to a pharmaceutical company. Smaller employers who maybe don't have that, it depends on where you are geographically.
Hmm.
I'm a big fan. Here's something typically you can do in a contract is you
Hmm.
can work with 340B community hospitals.
Right.
I often will take, a client's top drug list and I will go to a community hospital
Hmm.
that is in that zip code and basically will
Right.
say, we have these patients, this copay. What can we do to make sure that, can you beat this price? And I usually take about a 30% discount. So I will
Hmm.
take the cost that I'm seeing on a top 10 report and I will discount it 30% to account for rebates. And I will go to a community hospital and I will say, first and foremost, you have a pharmacy that can bill that PBM because you
Hmm.
want them, to be able to bill. If they don't, listeners, I don't want to make this too complicated, but 340B, I believe, is the way to go. You are supporting a community hospital.
Right.
The community hospital is the one who gets to make the profit, not the
Hmm.
PBM.
Right.
And you need that profit, by the way. There's a
Hmm.
lot of, people not using 340B the right way, but the right way
Right.
is to let these community hospitals make money so they can see all the other people who are uninsured and they can afford to be a part of your community.
Mhm.
And so I just think that the more that we're able to create partnerships that exist direct between the employer and
Mhm.
the community, I see it all the time in medical. There's a way to do it from the pharmacy. So that's the
Yeah.
easy one.
Okay.
Certainly, international is another way to look at importing medications. You can't mandate this to employees, but looking at if you have a drug that's your pain point,
Mhm.
I have very few medications that have stumped me.
Mhm.
But I can find usually some way to get some kind of relief on a medication. Sometimes it's only 10%. I don't want to
Mhm.
say it's
Sure.
always a great
Yep.
day, but you can negotiate, even if it means going right to the manufacturer and explaining, we have a patient, what can we do different?
Right.
And then you got to figure out how you process that claim from a HIPAA standpoint
Sure.
and, in a way that but those are the two easiest slam dunks. The bigger the group, the bigger you can ask your PBM if they would be willing to do a better discount at a local pharmacy.
Mhm.
Again, that's getting back to some of those community pharmacies that are left and seeing if
Right.
there's a way to incentivize people to use somebody's pharmacy.
Sure. Okay.
And that's really all you can do right now is really identify your main medications. I mean, there's education, there's teaching people about samples, there's a lot of tricks, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's what's going to make the biggest dent without being in a new PBM or contract.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's great. That's great. Thanks, Rachel. And two former guests that I've had on, Chris Deacon
Mhm.
and David Schenker, they both talked about the contract. Chris Deacon saved the state of New Jersey a couple $1 billion, I think,
Oh, yeah.
over 2 years on the PBM and then another half a billion on the healthcare spend. And I work mostly in the PPO space, and a lot of these things exist there as well. And it's big and it's big and ugly. I'm glad that you are in the fight
Thank
and you're
you.
so knowledgeable. It's great to have you again. If employers or brokers are trying to find someone to help them to decode the PBM world, where can they find you?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Rachel Strauss. And my Instagram is Rach is Strauss, where I've begun really trying to tell the story in a way I hope people understand. So please follow me there. And you can also email me, Rachel at rachelmstrauss.com. And that's an M like Meredith.
Okay. Wow. Excellent. So, for our listeners, if today's conversation helped you to see your pharmacy benefits part of your plan in just a little bit different way, please share this with your CFO or benefits team or another employer. You can catch all of our episodes at benefitwhisperer.com or wherever you get your podcasts. To reach me, the Benefits Whisperer, you can call 832-4330-ME. Ralph at thebenefitswhisperer.com or just visit fixmybenefitsnow.com. Until next time, I'm Ralph Weber, the Benefits Whisperer, and this has been another exciting episode of the Benefits Whisperer. Rachel, thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Ralph.